Hey everybody, what is going on? HexLex here, got another Master Duel video for you, and it's new pack day. New selection pack, the Perpetual Maze, has entered the shop as of today. So as I've done for the last pack, and I will continue to do for upcoming packs, I want to do a full breakdown of the Perpetual Maze. We're going to evaluate each UR, see what decks it goes into, how many copies you need, and how good that card is, and then I'll give an overall evaluation at the end of the video of whether or not I think this pack is overall worth going into. So, yep, we have all of the cards spoiled for the pack now, so I'm not going to waste any more time. Before I get into it, let's just go ahead and start reviewing this new selection pack. Mimighoul Master is the boss monster of the new Mimighoul archetype, and is a very, very potent part of it. As you can see here, it has the ability to add a Mimighoul monster from deck to hand upon summon, which will obviously make it fairly important. Now, funnily enough, despite being the deck's boss monster, you really only actually need one copy. From all my research and looking at various Mimighoul lists that have topped regionals, from what I can tell, they all only played the one. So, looking to be a decently cheap deck in that regard. That said, I don't think it's going to be exceptionally powerful. I think that Mimighoul will ultimately be a rogue level deck. And to be totally honest, I do think it's going to be on the lower end of the rogue spectrum. While the deck is very cute, I'm not going to deny that, it ultimately just does not have a whole lot of power behind it. And a lot of the best results I've seen it get in the TCG are paired with Kashtira, which, keep in mind that in the TCG, you know, Kashtira has access to 3 Fenrir and Unicorns. So definitely not going to be quite as powerful, but not a completely unplayable deck by any means. I think it's definitely a pretty firm rogue deck. Alright, next up we have Materiactor Exegard, which is the boss monster of the Materiactor archetype. Now, you might think that this is a completely brand new archetype because you've never heard of it before, but believe it or not, the Materiactor deck does actually already have a few cards in it. They're just not really very good at all, and they don't have any real cohesion to their strategy. And unfortunately, the new support really doesn't fix any of that at all. Materiactors are weird. They're an Xyz archetype that cares about vanilla monsters, and also cares about the materials under the Xyz monsters as far as being able to recycle them and whatnot. Now, granted, this card has a pretty powerful effect, right? Being able to detach material from this card in order to be able to either special summon a Materiactor monster or add a Materiactor spell trap that reads really, really powerfully. But if you look at the rest of the Materiactor cards, again, they're just not strong and they lack cohesion in what they want to do. I think Materiactor is a pretty firm, casual archetype. It's very rare that I say this, because it's honestly very rare this is true, but this archetype as a whole really just has absolutely no competitive viability whatsoever. If you really, really want to play this deck, then I guess you'd want 1, maybe 2 of this in your extra deck if you're playing a dedicated Materiactor deck. But I'm warning you right now, that is a firmly casual power level deck that I really don't think, even with a dedicated pilot, has a realistic shot of reaching Master 1. Sosei ryu-ge Mistva is the boss monster of the new ryu-ge archetype and is a ritual pendulum monster, which is very interesting. A lot going on with this card. Its Pend effect lets you search your ryu-ge cards, and then you can special summon this card from the extra deck when your monsters are destroyed by tributing your ryu-ge's, and then you can start popping cards and playing ryu-ge continuous spells for your deck. All in all, one of the cornerstones of the ryu-ge archetype for sure, and this one you do want a full playset of 3 in your dedicated ryu-ge decks. That is definitely where you're going to want to use this card, and like I said, with the ability to both be a searcher as well as your big kind of boss monster, it's definitely going to be a 3 of. The ryu-ge archetype as a whole, I'm going to also put in the rogue category. It's definitely better than Materiactor, and I think it's likely going to be better than Mimighoul as well. But I still think it's going to be a pretty firmly rogue deck. I honestly don't really think ryu-ge has any real chance of being a tiered deck, but I think with a dedicated enough pilot, you could squeeze in, you know, some pretty decent results with it. I mean, it's a cool archetype, you know, getting summon a bunch of really big monsters, but as far as how good it is, especially because we didn't get the follow-up support for ryu-ge in this selection pack. From what I understand, the follow-up support really does help the archetype in terms of consistency, so maybe when that comes out it'll be a little bit more viable, but even then I really don't see this deck really ever being tiered, but not completely unplayable. Crystron Eleskeletus is a new synchro monster for, well, of course, the Crystron archetype. Not quite like I wouldn't call it a boss monster because it's only level 7. You know, Crystron has bigger boss monsters that have more, you know, devastating onboard effects, but the Eleskeletus is very, very good, it seems, for just, you know, being able to build advantage and cycle into more stuff. When it's synchro summoned, you can add back a Crystron card. When it's destroyed, you can start summoning Crystron monsters, so definitely seems like a worthy inclusion for the deck, and from what I can tell in my research, Crystron plays 2 copies of this card pretty much every single time in its extra deck. Now, much like a lot of the other decks that I have discussed here, I'm gonna call Crystron Rogue, but I'll throw on an asterisk, because I think of the decks featured in this pack, Crystron is definitely the strongest. If ryu-ge and Mimigul are on the lower end of Rogue, then Crystron, I think, is definitely on the upper end of Rogue. I don't know, see, there's a thing with Mermaid Atlantean last time in the last pack review, where I was like, oh, I think this deck will be Rogue, but it might be tier 3. I'm not really going to hedge there, although I do think this deck is upper Rogue Crystron. I don't think it's really going to be tiered in Master Duel. Here's the thing. Crystron does get a lot better when the Canine archetype eventually comes out, which will definitely be quite a ways away. It only just got released in the OCG, so... but here's the other thing about that, is that there are a lot of decks that get better when the Canine archetype comes out to help support them, and there are decks that will perform better with Canine than Crystron does. So when K9 comes out, then I think K9 Crystron might be a tier 3 deck, but even then, it might still just get pushed down to Rogue due to other stuff being legal at that time. Again, that's very far in the future, but for the time being, I think Crystron is definitely going to be a Rogue level deck, but is the strongest among the decks in this pack, in my opinion. Alright, next up we have a card for the branded archetype, the only card among the URs at least for the branded archetype, the Alba System Dogmatic Calamity, which is definitely intended to be the sort of big boss monster here for the Albaz deck. And I mean big, it's got 4,500 attack, you defuse Albaz with 6 different monsters, and then it does have a pretty devastating effect wherein by you can send all cards in each player's extra deck to the graveyard. That said, even though this card is a part of Branded, which I would consider to be at least a tier 2 deck, I don't know, there might be a shot at the lower end of tier 1, maybe. That's probably stretching, that's almost assuredly stretching, but Branded, upper tier 2 level deck. Despite that, I'm going to give this card a casual power level rating, and I'm going to go ahead and say you don't play this card in Branded. I probably don't need to explain why, but in case you're kind of wondering why you wouldn't play this card in Branded, it's far too many hurdles to jump through, right? Even just summoning this card with 6 monsters in your graveyard with different names is going to be quite a task. But if you actually want to get the last effect off, then you need to have 6 or more fusion monsters in your graveyard with different names that mention Albaz, which really isn't going to likely happen until way later in the game. And if you're in a really late grind game, then you're at the point where sending your opponent's extract to the graveyard is going to have minimal results. This is just the definition of a win more card. If you're able to spend all of the time it would take in a game to set this up, you have already used enough resources where if you're playing just a regular branded deck, you could just use those to win, right? Like, think about using all of the different effects. You would have to go so far out of your way to do that many fusion summons, and it's like, if you do that many fusion summons, get that many fusion monsters in your graveyard, then still summon this, and resolve its effect, and your opponent didn't do anything, you definitely could have just killed them in that amount of time, right? So, again, Branded, very good deck. This card, not very good in that deck. I'm going to give this card a casual power level rating, and again, I'm going to say 0 copies, don't play this in Branded. Clockwork Knight is a new Link 1 machine monster. So being a Link 1, I think it's inherently worth keeping your eyes on this card. Link 1s in general tend to get a lot more utility than other Link monsters, naturally due to how easy they are to summon. This card does a couple of pretty interesting effects. When it's Link summoned, you can send a face-up continuous spell you control to the graveyard to add a Clockwork Knight, as in the spell card, from deck to your hand, which is obviously a pretty decent floodgate. But more importantly, you can potentially trigger the effects of your continuous spell cards that activate when they go to the graveyard, which is not something that's always been the easiest thing to access, and this is a Link one, so it's very easy to access in that regard. You can also tribute machine monsters on your field except this card to revive machine monsters with 1,000 or less attack from your graveyard, which is also the Link material requirement in order to summon this card. So it's got a pretty, a couple of pretty solid effects on it. And again, just being a Link one, it's worth looking out for. I would dare say that as far as like individual cards, as far as their standalone value goes, this is probably just the best card in this pack. Now, for the time being, it's not going to get played in much outside of Crystron and Cyber Dragon decks. That said, always worth keeping your eye on cards like this, right? There might be a machine archetype in the future that really wants this extension effect, or just the ability to link off into a Link one. There could be a deck that really wants to send continuous spells to the graveyard, so this could be useful for that. Or you could just, end up with a machine monster with 1,000 or less attack that has a really good effect when it's sent to the graveyard for any reason, and then you'd have Clockwork Knight to be able to easily link off into it. Again, I think we all know how broken Link 1s can potentially be, so keep an eye on this one. It's only going to be used in a couple of rogue power level decks for the time being, and you only need one copy of this card in those decks. But that's not to say this card's power level couldn't go up very easily in the future. Crystron Tristaros is a new main deck tuner monster for the Crystron archetype, which gives it a lot of legs for playing during your opponent's turn and just making plays in general. It can not only special summon a Crystron monster from your deck when your opponent activates card or effect, but then you can immediately quick synchro right after that. You can also, as a spell speed 1 effect, banish this card from your graveyard to pop one of your synchro monsters, and then you can special summon any 2 Crystron monsters from your deck. We already can see how that synergizes with the synchro monster we already talked about. The synchro monster can start adding stuff back, then this card destroys it, which will let it keep summoning more stuff back as you're summoning Crystron monsters from your deck as well. It's got a lot of utility, and from what I can tell in my research, most builds play 2 copies, but you can potentially play 3 if you really want to. But 2 is by far played in the majority of builds. As mentioned before, I think Crystron is going to be the strongest of the decks in this selection pack. Still think it's going to be Rogue power level, but definitely on the upper end of Rogue. Alright, Mimighoul Maker is a utility spell for the Mimighoul deck, which notably can not just special summon Mimighoul monsters, but actually any flip monsters. It works by revealing 2 flip monsters with different names in your deck. Your opponent randomly picks one to special summon to their field in defense mode, and then you add the other one to your hand. And then you can even special summon a Mimighoul from hand afterward. Of course, the whole thing about the Mimighoul archetype is that they're not only flip monsters, but they want to be set on your opponent's field, because when they get flipped face up, they have effects that are bad for the person who controls them. So this is a very good way of not only adding flip monsters / Mimighoul cards to your hand, but also getting them to your opponent's field as well. And when your opponent summons, you can, flip it up, so it gives you some manipulation there. I do think that Mimighoul is going to be the second weakest of the archetypes in this pack. Still notably better than Materiactor. But this card is definitely going to end up being a 3 of for that deck. Like I said, it's a very important utility spell. And again, worth noting that it can work for any flip effect monster. So definitely want to keep that in mind when you're building this deck to look at flip monsters in general as well. Alright, ryu-ge Rising is going to be a consistency spell for the ryu-ge archetype, allowing you to search ryu-ge cards from deck to hand, and then you can also, if you have the ryu-ge boss monster or a ryu-ge pendulum monster card rather, you can summon more ryu-ge monsters from your deck by banishing some from your graveyard. Now, this one's definitely going to be a 3 of for the archetype. There's a lot of these URs in this pack. We're going to see that this true of the next 2 as well. that are, you know, consistency spells for their, you know, respective archetype, which makes sense. It's a trend we've seen in MD before. I kind of feel like it's a way of getting you to go in on these decks by making these 3 of consistency spells URs. But yeah, I mean, ryu-ge I think is probably the second best deck in this pack. But unfortunately, it's still just going to be a mid to lower level rogue archetype. Materiactor Meltdown is a consistency spell for the Materiactor archetype. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say it here again. This is a firmly casual level archetype. It's just really not worth exploring competitively. And listen, I looked through TCG and OCG. I found maybe 2 instances of the OCG of somebody splashing a very, very light Materiactor engine in like Mermail Atlantean, but that was in one tournament that was about 40 people, which is just a locals, right? So yeah, if one locals top is all Materiactor has a claim for in its entirety of existing in TCG and OCG, I'm gonna call it a casual archetype. If you really, really want to play a pure Materiactor deck, then you probably do want to play 3 of this card. It's not even like a good search spell, because that doesn't actually just add a Materiactor card from deck to hand. You have to excavate the top 6 and just hope that there's a Materiactor card among them. So, I don't know. It's just not a good archetype. I don't know how else to say it. This is a... I don't normally say this about decks, because I think there are very few decks that are just unplayably bad, but this is one of them. Don't invest in this deck unless you really, really like this archetype for some reason, but yeah, don't buy it. It's bad. And finally, we have Crystron Inclusion. Continuous spell for the Crystron archetype. Yet another consistency spell that's going to end up being a 3 of for this deck. Not surprising to me that Crystron ends up getting with the most URs in this pack, because it is the best of these decks. But yeah, I mean, yeah, here's a continuous spell that actually just adds the card from deck to hand, among, of course, doing other things that are all pretty relevant, including banishing this card from your graveyard to special summon a Crystron from your graveyard, which of course explains how Clockwork Knight gets its utility in this deck by sending this card to the graveyard. So yeah, definitely, like I said, play a full playset of 3 of this if you are interested in Crystron, which again is going to be the best deck in this pack. And that'll just about wrap up this review for the Perpetual Maze. So overall, what do I think? A lot of you probably already see this coming, but for me personally, I will not be pulling from this pack. This one is going to be a skip for me. There is really not anything in here that super grabs my attention personally, and from a power level perspective, as we went through, none of these decks really scrape above the rogue category. It's not even like last pack where I said, oh, we have Mermail Atlantean, which I think will be rogue but could be tier 3, and I think it's probably a tier 3 deck. I really don't think, except for maybe Crystron, any of these decks really have a shot of being tiered honestly at all. Not that they're completely unplayable, for the most part, looking at you, Materiactor, but if you're like me and prefer to focus on competitive decks, then I personally would probably not bother pulling from this one. But what do you think of this pack? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. Either way, that's going to go ahead and do it for now, so let's move on to our outro. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.